Before I even start, I just want to ask, how many people are pretty comfortable with the term corpus or corpora? Okay, how many people have heard of it, but they haven't really used it in their teaching, want to know more? Okay. Is anybody already using it in their class? Okay, good. Okay, well, for those people especially, what I'm hoping to do today is kind of demystify it a little bit and make you realize that it's not so nerdy, it's not just counting numbers, there are lots of practical applications you can use in your classroom. And I realized that I actually put the answer to my first question on the handout, so we don't have to be too interactive. But what I wanted to do was, well, before that, let me just tell you a little bit about how I got interested in corpus. A few years ago at a teacher training, there was a recap. A teacher came in and she wanted to tell us about CATESOL, New York, and what she had learned, all the cool things. And she started off the conversation by saying, okay, everybody, which one do we use more often, used to or would for past habits? So I used to do something or I would do something in the past. And so teachers discussed, we thought about it, and what's the most common thing that's emphasized in our textbooks?
Used to.
Used to gets a lot of attention, and then would gets this little sidebar like, oh, by the way, you can also do that. Well, it turns out that would is much more common in real life when we speak than used to. And I asked, well, how do you know? And she said, corpus linguistics. So that got me kind of thinking, okay, well, I want to know more about this. What else are they not telling me in the textbook? And how else can I use corpus to find out more about how language is actually used? So the first question that I already gave you the answer to is, what does it mean to really know a word? Okay, so we talk a lot about this, and Nation talks about this a lot in vocabulary learning. And some of the things that people maybe don't think about, other than just the dictionary definition, is meanings in different contexts. So when a student says they know how to use a word, what does that actually mean? Well, that means that they know how to use that word in different contexts, because knowing a word doesn't have just one meaning. It changes a lot how that, depending on how that word is used. Okay, collocations. Did anyone go to the Guadalupe Valdez thing? She kind of sounded like talking about collocation was a bad thing. Like it was uncool. But I think collocation is really important. So these are the words that go together frequently or tend to go together with your vocabulary words. Lexical patterns, or we talk about lexicogrammar, the idea that we're not just teaching vocabulary or grammar. When we teach vocabulary, we're also talking about the grammar that goes with that vocabulary. So that's really important to not separate those. And then finally, register. How formal or informal is a word? Is this an academic word or a non-academic word? All those things are really important when students are trying to learn how to use these words in another language. So, Rebel, can you do this with me? Okay. All right. So, has this ever happened to you?
Teacher, can I say make my homework?
No, you can't. We say do homework.
But I say make in German.
Well, you can in English. We do homework.
But why can't I say make?
Because you can't. Okay, this is the important part.
But I think I heard someone say make. Are you sure?
And this is usually how I end up. Okay, so how do you get students to think about those things? Because there's not really a good answer. You just don't, or you just can't. Okay, so I had this happen to me all the time, and I get really, really frustrated because students want an answer and there really isn't one. And I started thinking, well, you know what? What if I had a lot of great examples where it is this certain way? I could probably help people to see a little bit better what I'm trying to get them to see. So the question is, how do we get students to notice these things like collocations and register and to actively seek them out? Well, I'm sure you do all these things in your class already, but we can emphasize these things. So when we're talking about new vocabulary, we can ask students, is this academic, is this non-academic, is this formal or informal? Collocations, when I'm writing things on the board, I don't just write the new vocabulary word and new words list, I also write the most frequent collocations that I probably have planned out before or the most common, so that students get thinking about that, but also kind of, they can expect those things when they're using this new word. Lexical patterns, so the same idea that it's not just teaching one word. If I'm teaching a word that's going to be very common in one phrase, I'll probably want to put that phrase up on the board too. Okay? Use inductive teaching methods. This is exactly what Dr. Wallace was talking about this morning. So not just giving students vocabulary, giving students the answer, but giving them data so that they can find the answers themselves and kind of think about it, because that's what they're going to do in the real world. And lastly, making that connection between the language in the classroom and what we actually, or what our students are actually going to see when they get out in the real world. Because if that doesn't reflect, if the language in our classroom doesn't reflect what they're actually going to see, then we're kind of wasting our time. We're not preparing them for the real world. Okay, so again, we talked about what is a corpus, and the typical definition is something more or less like this. A corpus is a principal collection of texts, which can be searched using concordance software to find frequent words, collocations, and lexical patterns. And usually when I say a definition like that, I just think, I don't get it. But basically, it's just a lot of texts put together in a computer program that we can now, because of computers, we can search and get to know a lot more about how language is used in real life. Things like frequent words, collocations, lexical patterns. And my new favorite toy, which some of my friends were talking about earlier today, is the Coca corpus. So, yeah, don't worry, I've got smaller ones you can see a little bit better. But the Corpus of Contemporary American English was created by Mark Davies over at Brigham Young University. And this is his interface. This is actually one of the better ones, but it's still kind of intimidating at first. It's comprised of 400 million words, distributed pretty much equally between 1990 until about now, 2009. It's divided up, it's principled, there's the principled part. It's divided up by spoken English, fiction, magazine, newspaper, and academic. So if you work out the math, that's about 80 million words in each of those. If I click on a word, or if I type in a word, I pick underline, I get 8,162 hits, which means if I click on that, I can get 8,000 concordance lines, examples of this word underline. Okay? So looking at a little bit closer, we've got another look here at our registers or our subsections. What's cool about this, that I didn't know when I first started looking at it, was that you can actually whittle it down a little bit further. So maybe you don't want to just look at all of the corpus, or maybe you don't want to just look at magazine or newspaper. Maybe if my students are, I don't know, education majors, or if they're all in nursing, maybe I want to look at academic texts that just have to do with science and technology, or just education. And that helps a lot, because then you get less hits, and they're probably a little bit closer to the kinds of examples that you really want to show students. The spoken part, how did they get 80 million words of spoken English? Well, they took transcripts from CBS, CNN, Fox, PBS, NPR, transcripts from all of these shows. So that means that it's still spontaneous language, but it's not exactly the same kind of language you would hear on the bus in San Francisco, for example. And because it's CNN, Fox, PBS, you can kind of pick your politics there. I would probably just look at all of that together. I wouldn't separate it out. Although that could be a good linguistic study, you know, how the words get separated. Okay, so back to our word underline. I can click on this chart function, and this is going to show me, of those 8,000 hits, where is it most commonly used? So guesses? Is it spoken? Huh?
Written.
Okay, it's written, yeah. Academic. So we've got some choices here. Magazine, news. We've got one for academic.
How about fiction?
Fiction? How can it be fiction? I don't know.
We'll see.
Let's find out. Actually, fiction was the least used. So yeah, so I can click on this word underline, or any word.
Academic,
Yeah. Overwhelmingly academic. So we've got here per million, 57 words per million of this word. And yeah, 4,556 hits on the academic part of those 8,000. So it's overwhelmingly academic, and that's obviously something we want our students to know more about. Okay, I know you can't read that, but I just wanted to show you what it would look like. If I clicked on the bar for academic, I can get all these concordance hits, all 4,000 of them if I wanted,